Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. I am sure that you can't get enough of these release ranking videos, which is just as well because here's another one. Several of the model manufacturers release their announcements pretty much at the same time, and jcwings is one of those. They put theirs out almost always right at the end of the month. So here are their September announcements, which were announced probably about 4 or 5 days ago now. But they got skipped by the Gemini and the NG videos. If you haven't watched those, check those out. But I can't forget jcwings. You can't forget them. Though sometimes it seems like they want you to, because they produce quite a lot of forgettable models, but you can't forget jcwings. There's still something there. And so this month is an enormous month for JC. They are out NGing NG here with 25 models, and that's not even including the flaps down versions. So that's more than NG released this month, and it seems very much that, or at least I'm hoping, that JC are trying to get some of these models out of their warehouse that have been sitting around forever and ever, which means that hopefully they'll clear some space for something newer and more interesting. And that does mean that a good chunk of this set are pretty much repeats of models they've made already, but not all of them. There is quite a lot of interest here, and arguably and disturbingly, they're more interesting than a lot of the NG announcements, but perhaps that's just my classic leanings coming into play. Having said that, obviously, unlike NG, JC are sometimes let down by the quality of the molds they're using, especially for narrow bodies. So that's what we're going to look through in this video. But before we do that, obviously subscribe to the channel, chuck a like on the video. Really appreciate you guys watching, and girls and kids and anyone who feels like watching. Thank you very much. Check me out at the YouTube channel. Check me out at Yesterday Airlines on Instagram, and check me out on Facebook. Obviously, check out yesterdaysairlines.com. Still plenty of content to come. Got new NG molds coming up. I've got some really cool aviation history pieces coming up. One on Air Europe, Continental Micronesia, and one on KD Avia from Kaliningrad, which I wrote ages ago. I never got around to publishing. Also got a detailed look at 777s coming up, and loads of other cool stuff. So keep an eye out for that. But for now, we're talking jcwings, and let's try and get through these 25 releases. So where else to start than the start? And the start, as everyone knows, is Airbus, because it begins with A. So first up, we've got an EasyJet A320 Neo GUZHA. And I think this is probably their first Neo, so it feels fairly reminiscent of older releases. But oddly, when I look through the release sets, JC don't seem to have made an A320 Neo. So actually this is a new model, which is a little surprising. I swore they had made this though, but they obviously haven't. Panda Models have. They have made this exact aircraft. They also made UZHB. Obviously not that many people make EasyJet because EasyJet get very grumpy about it. But what do I think about this model? It would be good if it weren't for those engines. Now, the rest of the mold isn't exactly kicking it out of the park either, but the engines, as I always moan, are the problem here. And I'm going to put this one into gas guzzler, even though that's perhaps a little harsh, because there aren't that many EasyJet Neos around, but hey, I'm doing it anyway. Next up is an LTU A330-200. The reg is D Alpha Lima Papa India. And this is wearing the, or a version anyway, of the transition colours, the Air Berlini style LTU with the LTU on the tail, which never really fit that way. Clearly, their least interesting colours ever. And in fact, jcwings made this scheme not that long ago on a different reg, ALPD, 2022, so last year. The only difference here is that this one's got small LTU.com titles. The other one had much bigger LTU billboard titles. So for all you LTU completists out there, this model will be super exciting, I imagine, for the majority of collectors. it's a lot less exciting. I'm going to put this one into Workhorse, considering it is 90% the same as a model they released last year, which actually had the better version of the scheme on it. And continuing this kind of theme, next up is a Garuda A33900 PK Golf Yankee Alpha. And as you would expect, it is not the first time that jcwings have made this one either. They made Golf Yankee Charlie, and that was made in 2020, so 3 years ago, probably exactly the same time as this one was made, but just been sitting in the warehouse. I like the JC A330 Neo, though it clearly is going to be not quite as good as the upcoming NG version, but I like it. But it is definitely Workhorse in this scenario because they've made it before. Now, something they haven't made before is the next one, which is a Condor A330-900 Neo. It's D Alpha November Romeo Hotel. It's wearing the beige version of the new beach towel colours. So far, we've only had the green version made by Gemini, and we've not had this beige version. So, actually, Phoenix made it too. And interestingly, the greens on the Phoenix and the Gemini one are nothing like each other. But anyway, nobody's made this beige version. The only thing that I'm slightly questioning is the positioning of the cockpit windows, but otherwise, should be good. It's unique. It's nice to see. It feels odd now when you can actually say you get a unique aircraft airline combo. So much repetition. But this one is good. I'm going to put this one in high flyer. Just keep an eye on where those cockpit windows are. And that's it for the Airbuses this month. You've got 25 releases. But admittedly, some of those releases are future releases. We'll talk about at the end. And there are some Airbuses there. But of the 20 or so, which are, I was going to say next month, but it's obviously not next month. The 20 or so, which will be released in the next 2 or 3 months, only 4 Airbuses. Highly unusual, that. And before we get into the Boeings, I'm going to skip across a couple of commuters. So just change things up a little. And the first models there to discuss is an Amazon Prime Air ATR 72-500 freighter. The reg is N967AZ. I believe this is operated by Silver Airways in reality, but you can't really tell that from the actual aircraft. The scheme's quite nice. It's all perfectly reasonable. Really like the JC ATR, so that's all good. But again, they've made this one before. They made 919AZ last year, so this is just a follow-up to that one, and no doubt made at the same time. So, yeah, you know what that means. It's got to be Workhorse, doesn't it? Because it's just a repeat. And the next model is Fuji Dream Airlines, an airline that JC seem to like quite a lot. In fact, they're the only people who like it. And this is the 6th Fuji Dream Airlines Embraer 170 that has been released. This one is JA04FJ. And it's wearing this light green colour scheme. Fuji Dream, yeah, each aircraft seems to have its own scheme colour. They've got dark blue, they've got red, they've got light blue, they've got silver, and they've got green as well. Unfortunately, the green bears absolutely no resemblance to the green that jcwings have put on this model here. I've seen some suggestion this is a fantasy version, but clearly I don't think that's true. I think it's more likely that jcwings just balls the colours up enormously and have released it anyway, because it doesn't look at all anything like the real aircraft. So that's interesting that this one has been released. A model that probably should never have got out of the factory. And I'm going to put this one in gas guzzler because it doesn't look anything like the real aircraft. If it were a fantasy, you wouldn't be putting a real reg on it, would you? You'd be putting a fantasy reg. And why would anyone make a fantasy colours for Fuji Dream Airlines anyway? Okay, now we've got quite a long stream of Boeings to get through. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but especially because the first one is excellent. The first one is exactly the sort of model which I think they should be making more of, using their molds to produce unique airline aircraft combos that no one else has made, especially classic ones. And even though I hate to really say the 1990s is classic territory, I guess for a lot of people it is. So, what is the aircraft airline? It is British Midland, and it is a 737-400 Golf Oscar Bravo Mike Echo. Really haven't had that much British Midland in these 90 colours, or certainly not on a 737. They could do a 300 too. The only thing I'd say about this one is, for those with eagle eyes, this reg is a little infamous because it is the aircraft which crashed onto the motorway verge short of the runway after I think the crew shut down the wrong engine. Some people did die in that crash, so it's not just a comedy crash, and I know that there are people who aren't happy when manufacturers produce aircraft that have been destroyed. Then again, personally, it doesn't upset me in any way, and all the brands do it. NG released China Eastern 77 just recently that had crashed. Aero Classics made the Ethiopian Max that crashed, and so on and so forth. It is part of aviation history, and in that guise, it is interesting. So it doesn't bother me, but they could have perhaps chosen another reg and made it less controversial. But nonetheless, ignoring that, the mold's fine. It's definitely a model which I will want to acquire. Supersonic, without a shadow of a doubt, this one, supersonic, easily. If only the rest of the Boeings here were as good as that one. The next Boeing is a 737-700, or what the Americans call a C-40A Clipper, when it's in military service with the US Navy, as it is here. The reg is 165835. Hey, there's nothing to see here. Their mold isn't particularly good for 73G, and they made literally the same aircraft last year. Was it last year? It was with it was 165834, not 835. The US Navy scheme is effectively just a blank aeroplane, really, with a tiny cheat line. They could at least put something cool on the tail. So, not remotely interesting. This one, they made it before. I don't think the molds are really good. I'm going to put this one gas guzzler because it's just annoying me. I don't know why they made two of them in the first place. There's another 73G this month, and that one is a bit more interesting. That one's in the colours of Aero Mexico. The reg is N784XA, so it's a US registered aircraft. It's wearing, special scheme's a stretch, but it's wearing visa titles, so it's kind of half a special scheme. No one else has made this. And JC actually haven't made an Aero Mexico 73G before, which makes me think they must have one sitting around without these visa titles on it. But there have been quite a few recently. There have been a couple by NG and one from Panda, which I think was a Waffle exclusive that was made not too long ago. And even Aero Classics got in on the act. That must have been quite a few years back, though. So there have been quite a few of these just without the visa titles. Does that make it worth buying? Not really sure. And as I say, I don't really like the mold too much. So I'm going to put this one into Workhorse, I think. It doesn't get to be high flyer because it's not really, even though it's got these visa titles. Is that really that unique? Yeah, no, not really. So I'm not going to put that one into high flyer. But even though I'm not an enormous fan of the JC 737 next generation molds, I think I might just high flyer this next one, which is a KLM aircraft. It is PH Bravo X-Ray Alpha, and it is wearing the delivery colours with the big, thick, dark blue cheat line. So 3 schemes ago for KLM. And when I look back through the list of the 737-800s that have been made for KLM, there's a really bit of a mixed bag here. There's some really, truly horrific Phoenix versions with cockpit windows all over the shop. There's a couple of old Witties and a Gemini using this mould. But they're all got different schemes. None of them have got this scheme. NG had made 3 recently, but again, one's wearing the retro colours and 2 others are wearing the more recent scheme. So nobody has made this livery, which is probably the most interesting livery from my perspective. And it's, like I say, this is much like the British Midland. It's good to see JC producing models that no one has before. It's just a shame that the mould isn't better. What do I think? I think I can high fly this one. I'm going to put this one on high fly, but just be aware that, you know, this mould isn't great, but it does look better actually when they don't have the wing lits on it, as this one doesn't. So generous, I feel I'm being there to put that into high fly, but I'm going to. There is another 737-800 this month as well, and that one I'm less generous towards. It's Jeju Air from South Korea. Again, when you look through the 8 announced Jeju Air 737s, yeah, they're not very exciting, are they? And again, there's some really questionable Phoenix versions with some dreadful cockpit window printing, and one of them, I remember, is a real shocker. In fact, it's the same tail livery as this one that Phoenix really made a mess of. And this is the tail livery with these like wavy lines as opposed to circles and things. So there have been quite a few Jeju 737s made by JC and Phoenix. They all broadly look the same, except the tail is slightly different. Not very exciting airline, and not particularly high quality releases in terms of the mould. So I'm going to put this one into workhorse, and yeah, should be thankful that it got that far. So we're coming up to the halfway point in this release set, and the 12th model is another re-release, unfortunately. It's SP Lima Victor Bravo. It's a LOT 737 MAX 8 for LOT, the Polish national carrier. Perfectly fine, but exactly the same as one they made not long ago. They made LVF. They made LVD2, but that had a special scheme on it. But last year they made LVF in the standard colours, so no real need for this one. Workhorse obviously is where that's going. And there's another Max also, and this one is Shenzhen Airlines B1160. And when I look back through what's been made here, I already own the Panda Models version of this. But interestingly, there is, from 2018, a jcwings version, which, as far as I can tell, has never actually been released. They announced it and never released it. It's one of these 4 years ago models that they, or 5 years ago models that they announced and never actually released. And this is one of the problems with JC. They are just badly organised. They announce models and then forget that they've announced them and don't release them. And so somehow they've slipped out now another Shenzen Max, which is different to the one they've already announced and haven't released. It's weird. It's weird. So presumably the other Shenzhen Max is still in the factory somewhere, but just forgotten. So in a sense, that makes this new release higher scoring, in a sense, because there hasn't been another Shenzhen Max other than the Panda Models version, which is quite hard to find, but as I say, I already own it. So I'm going to put this one in the high flyer, but I find the whole situation bemusing and not in a good way, because they're announcing models and then forgetting about them sometimes, and that's just embarrassingly poor. So weird, but nonetheless, this new Max therefore becomes unique. Funny old world. Okay, and that's out of the narrow body Boeings, and now we're storming into some jumbo territory. jcwings does seem to have access to the Big Bird 747 molds sometimes, or when it feels like it anyway. And they've made a couple of Singapore Airlines and Singapore hybrid 747-200s, and now they're finally following up with a standard colours 747-200. So we've got 9V Sierra Quebec Oscar here, looking really nice on the Big Bird mould. But they made Sierra India Alpha not long ago, but that one had the California Here We Come titles, and that was made 2 years ago. So presumably again these models were made at the same sort of time, and they've just got around to releasing this version now. It's a nice mould, it's a great airline choice, so I'm going to put this one in the high flyer, but at the same time, you know, because it's kind of been pre-released in a sense on the older version, I'm less excited than I would be. And I actually own a perfectly good Dragon Wings Singapore 747, and this mould, even though it's really good, is old, not so good that I'm going to replace the Dragon version with it. So nice as it is, and the fact I'm giving it a high flyer, it still is not really it's not really, you know, really high flyer, is it? It's kind of just nudging into high flyer. And that's the only Series 200 this month, but there are a couple of 400s. The first one, which is available in both flaps up and down, is not particularly exciting. It's China Airlines, one of JC's favourite airlines. B18212. There's already been a release for Albatross, which was B18215. There's been an earlier JC release on this mould, which had the 60th anniversary logo on it. And that was 18210. And there have been plenty of other China Airlines 747-400s. In total, there have been over 50, actually, though a lot of them are rubbish. So, as good as this one is, how exciting could you get? I tell you how excited. You can get excited enough to put it into workhorse, which is just what I'm going to do. The other 747-400 though this month is a lot more interesting, but also slightly disappointing. It's a Lufthansa Series 400 in the delivery colours, D, A, B, T, E, and that's all great. And the sort of model which I'm quite tempted to get, or at least I would be, if the cost of the thing wasn't astronomical, I imagine. Let me just check what the cost is. The reason it's astronomical, yeah, it is astronomical. I can see the prices here are high. Actually, at Waffle is only $56, but other places it's a lot more. And that's because it comes with an aviation tag. Recently, JC's been doing this. It's been putting aviation tags with some models. It's been putting some stickers with those big bird models. And it's just like, I'm buying the model. I'm not buying an aviation tag. If I wanted to buy an aviation tag, I'd go out and buy an aviation tag, wouldn't I? And I certainly don't need a sticker. So, things that just elevate the price of models in a market where the price of models has already been elevated quite a lot, you know, don't exactly fill me with joy. And that means this is a model that I've gone from probably would get to one where I'm going, probably I won't, because I just don't need the tag. It's just an unnecessary addition and it's increased the cost, and that's annoying. And this isn't a model that I desperately have to own. It's just one that I'd quite like to get. So yeah, that's disappointing. It's a little bit annoying, and I'm sure that we'll be seeing more Lufthansa 747-400s in the future. And I have to say, actually, that looking at the pictures more closely, this isn't technically delivery colours because it's got this Lufthansa.com on the back end of it, and that annoys me because I'd much rather have the delivery colours, which obviously, so the original 747-400s were delivered before the internet was widely in existence or widely available, so Lufthansa didn't have a website at that point. But I'll still put it into high flyer, I think. But, you know, if this had just been a standard 747-400 without the aviation tag, I think I'd be minded to make it supersonic, and I'm not. Next is a kind of classic jcwings product. It is a Cathay Pacific Cargo 7478 freighter, and this model comes in the orange box, which indicates this model's been hanging around some time in the factory. The reg is BLJC. It is the 100th Boeing aircraft, presumably that Cathay had got, and it's got a little 100 decal on the front of it. But that isn't really enough to raise this too far. JC have made quite a variety of Cathay 7478 freighters, including in the brushwing colours before the current scheme. They've made at least 3, I believe, although some of those have been interactive. Not all of them have been. Yeah, and that is really just means that, again, this one is just kind of sounding and feeling kind of very workhorse to me. Now, probably the second model out of all these models that I've discussed that has caused a little bit of excitement is the next one, and that is because it is the Gimli glider. It's an Air Canada 767-200 CGAUN, famous for landing without any power when the aircraft ran out of fuel. This one should be super nice. It's got a nice old mould, updated very nicely with aerials and rolling gear. Arguably better than the Aero Classics mould with the slot-in wings. But I have to say I do own the Aero Classics version of this. It's not a bad model. Is this one going to be dramatically better? Probably not dramatically better. It might be slightly better. The printing will probably be better. The mould is probably slightly better. But this is not so much better that I'm getting too excited. So again, I think for me, this is definitely hitting high flyer territory, but not supersonic territory, because it has been made before and I already own that model. And it wasn't bad. It's just not, you know, it's Aero Classic standard for a 767. So, good choice. But I think just high flyer. And the other 767 this month is less interesting because they've already announced their SAS 763 this year in this scheme. And they haven't even changed it to a different country. So it's LNRCH this time, and it was LNRCG last time. I presume there were some non-Norwegian registered 767-300s in the fleet. Nothing otherwise very interesting to say about this. It's basically the same model, and therefore it's workhorse, hey? And that just leaves us one more model to talk about when it comes to the releases that are going to be out soon, and that is another flaps up and flaps down version. But again, it's not very exciting. It's Korean Air. It's a 777-300 HL7204 standard scheme. They've already made, well, actually they haven't made, but Gemini have made a standard scheme 777-300 using this exact same mold, and they made that last year. So again, effectively this is a re-release, just the JC version of the Gemini. And again, I'm going to workhorse this one too. So not, you know, particularly exciting bunch of Boeings, but it's interesting when you look at the models that I've talked about thus far. There's a huge amount of repetition, which I'm workhorsing largely, though occasionally I gas guzzle when the molds aren't good enough or they've made some horrendous error, like on the Fuji Dream. But there's still some which are slipping through up into high flyer, slightly more unique, slightly more interesting, like the British Midland, the Condor, that KLM, and the Lufthansa 747, and then occasionally even ones that are quite similar to variants they've made before or have been made by others. But it feels very much like JC here are kind of existing, really. It's not the sort of really set to get the hearts racing, and you can see that there's only the one supersonic so far. There are some other models which we need to talk about, and considering what I said about the Shenzen Max and them never having actually released the one that they announced, you have to, you know, take all of these with something of a grain of salt. But there are 5 more models to talk about here as well, so we'll just quickly go over those. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, they're not very interesting anyway. First up, there's an Etihad Dreamliner wearing the Mission Impossible colours. I'm pretty sure that NG Models will release this as well, though they haven't announced it yet. Nobody else has announced this. JC have been making quite a lot of Etihad 787s, and they've all looked very nice. But who knows when this one's going to come out. I'll slip this one in the high flyer because no one else has technically announced it, even though, like I say, I'm pretty sure NG have kind of half announced it. The rest of the models here are not as interesting or as good. Firstly, there's an Air New Zealand A320 Neo, ZK NHC. Yeah, nothing to see there really, is there? It's going to be the same old Neo mould. It's going to be gas guzzled because I don't like that mould. And then the other 3 models, they all kind of have the same feeling to me. They're in special schemes or on ordinary moulds or both. We've got an AirAsia A321 converted freighter, 9M TLA. It's wearing its teleport colours, which, you know, not that exciting to be honest from what I've seen. The aircraft is pretty much just all over black with some blue stripes and doesn't really say anything about AirAsia on it. It just says teleport. Not very interesting. Then we've got a Qantas freighter A330 wearing the Australia Post colours, PHEBF. This one will be nice, but again, who knows when it's going to release, and the mould isn't that spectacular. And then last up, we've got a JetBlue A320 wearing, again, a special scheme which covers the entire aircraft. It's called Peacock. I don't know what the product is there. and the reg is N706JB. Should be okay, the mold's okay. I'm just going to work off all of those. None of them are very exciting, not particularly interesting special schemes when they are specials. The molds aren't particularly great for any of them, but yeah, they are, you know, and who knows when they're going to come out, and there's a good chance someone else will make them before they arrive on the scene. So overall, I would say that this set of jcwings is pretty weak, but to be fair, I didn't like the NG releases announcements this month, and I wasn't overly stimulated by the Gemini ones either. It's not been a great month for mold announcements, except for Aero Classics, who've made some excellent choices this month. If you haven't seen those A310s and 737s and such, then they were great choices. Not always great finishing, but great choices. So, not a great month so far. I have to say, October or end of September for release sets. There's some nice stuff here, but sprinkled amongst a lot of mediocrity. Hopefully, I say this quite a lot, hopefully things will improve and these manufacturers will get a better grasp on what they're doing and stop wasting so much zinc, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it for this set of jcwings announcements. It's always, you know, I'm interested to hear what people think, what models they're looking at buying for themselves. So drop a comment on the video and tell me what it is you're after. Does it bother you that they made that crashed British Midland 737? That sort of thing. Interested to hear people's views. So give me a shout. But thank you very much for watching anyway. And that's it for now from yesterday's Airlines. I need to get started on the reviews of those NGMD80s. So I really should stop doing these videos and start doing that. But that's it from me for now. See you next time.